I think I do have time to read this story by Ezekiel Kralin. I didn't think I did, but I'm going to slip it in. Chirp, Chirp, Squawk is the title of this. And it's the continuing story of the two little dogs, Lucky and Flacco, and of Zeke and his friendship with a crackhead or meth head or whatever they call them these days, whose name is Deke and who lives out on the street and abuses and yells at and expects money and favors from Ezekiel. And it goes on from the point here where the subject of an email being chronicled is 3 more angels continued, date January 2nd, afternoon, the second angel. About 40 minutes later, a burly Latina with her girlfriend suddenly appeared before me as I was rifling through Deke's cart for any spare sweaters. The moment I looked up, she gazed back with a stern but friendly demeanor and said, "You better use this to take care of my babies." She held out a $20 bill, which I took and replied, "Definitely, thanks so much." And off they went before I had a chance to engage them in amiable parley. I guess she had spent a minute petting the brindle mutts on the other side of the cart, and I didn't notice. The third angel. This was much later. In fact, I'd already hit the sack by 1:30 a.m. after checking on the pups' comfort while their master was also in slumber. Almost an hour passed before I suddenly heard Flacco's barks, so got up and looked out the window. She was up the block a bit, perhaps warding off some crazy tweaker or someone else's dog. "Flacco, come here," hollered Deke. He called her a couple of times before she returned to his side after casually sniffing about. He swept her into his arms and beneath the thick coat under which he rested. Lucky was not snuggled with them, but remained by the lamp-post, hidden within that sleeping bag like a big old lump. I decided anyway to step back out to be sure he was fully covered and warm and to top off the water bowl. Upon opening the gate, I noticed an Asian fellow of short stature and clothed in a thick brown overcoat, standing to my immediate left and munching on a burrito. I ignored him, a bit irritated to have yet another stranger standing so close to the entryway. I crouched down over Lucky and lifted part of the sleeping bag, upon which he raised his head part way to see it was me, thus laid his noggin back down while I gave a few pats and a kiss. He was toasty warm to the touch, but I gathered up one end of the bag that stuck out and folded it over him anyway, so he'd have a double layer on top. With that, I picked up the bowl that had barely any water remaining, then walked over to Deke to observe everything was A-OK, with Flacco completely sheltered from the cold. I flashed a brief smile toward the Asian guy, and he did likewise as I opened the gate and marched back upstairs. A minute later I came back down to set the replenished bowl beside the shopping cart, and as I returned to the gate, he said to me, "That's a good thing you're doing." I replied, "Well, thank you. We've known each other for years." "Those dogs are very cute," he noted while pointing at them with the half-eaten burrito. "Well, I never know when he's going to park out here for the night," I replied in sweet resignation, "so I never know when I'll get a good night's sleep or not." He chortled at that. I then opened the gate, and just before it shut, he added, "I live in this building too." "Aha," I replied. "See you around then, and Happy New Year." Didn't I say in a recent missive that there will always be angels who step in to give succor through whatever trials you suffer? So look what happened. 3 more angels last night on top of the 2 just last Friday. Didn't I also say no one in my building takes a moment to see the kindness of my actions? I guess I was wrong about that. Here's a picture of Deke and hounds from last night. Lucky is huddled under that blue sleeping bag on the right. Flacco is curled up in the top center area, but it's too dark to see her there. She is resting on a layer of clothing Deke laid down. A bit later, I tossed a large black jacket on her for additional warmth. I found it on the 3rd floor back porch minutes earlier, and now another picture from this morning. Sometime in the wee hours, Deke obviously brought Lucky to join him and Flacco, along with the sleeping bag, which is something I wished him to do, so I was glad to see it. I just didn't like the idea of Lucky sleeping that far apart from them. Around 12:30 p.m., he called me downstairs to watch the pups while he could spend some of that $20 on a small burrito or 2 at the Chevron station. I said, "Okay," put on my coat, and just when I reached for the doorknob, he hollered up, "Come on, where are you?" So I stepped back to the window and replied, "I just put on my coat and I was about to step out when you called me back to the window." Geez, I thought, I'm not a magical genie where he can snap his fingers and have me appear in a flash. When I approached, the canines bursting with joy to see me as usual, Lucky squirming on his back, and Flacco standing up against my leg for caresses, their master was already many yards up the block. Around 15 minutes later, he returned with Wes, which is good, as the company of a street friend always mellows him out. It's almost 1 o'clock, Deke, I said. Let me feed the dogs. So I did, while Wes and Deke talked about whatever. I didn't eavesdrop, but I assume some sort of weed exchange, as that seems the main reason Wes associates with him. Not like he cares to speak with yours truly. It's always just a curt, "Hi, Zeke," and nothing more. At any rate, he soon departed to leave Deke and pups huddled beneath the sleeping bag their master tossed over them to resist the steady drizzle that's been falling from the sky the past 2 hours. See this picture. Click here for a larger view. He did have a massive waterproof canvas. I don't know how he acquired it, and when I looked out my window, I wondered why he didn't use that to keep the sleeping bag from getting soaked. It had only begun to drizzle, so there was still time to keep the bag mostly dry. So I stepped outside to see if I could find it, and lo and behold, there it was, folded and dumped beside the trash bin, smeared in several spots with runny doggy poo and or vomit, though I doubt it came from the Brindlekin, or perhaps, being tethered to the cart all night long, maybe they relieved themselves on it. Wait a minute, I think he had them off leash after he brought Lucky over from the opposite side of the cart, so that really doesn't make sense. I actually have no idea how that canvas got so fouled up. Someone else's dog? A drunk celebrant puked? Be that as it may. Shaman Trickster Deke is a vortex of endless complications, difficulties, and mishaps, much of which he seems to bring upon himself. I also found one of the doggy's sweaters lying by the shopping cart's left front wheel. So he must have removed it, and I can't fathom why. It was only slightly damp at that point, so I brought it upstairs to hang dry. I don't know if he'll let me remove the other sweater and put 2 dry ones on the pups, but I certainly don't think I can do it now while he's hunkered beneath the sleeping bag, as I'm sure he'll yell at me for the disturbance and refuse my help. It's now 2:40 p.m., and they're still out there. But it looks like the rain is finally letting up, at least for a while. Maybe he'll take that window of opportunity to migrate to a sheltered spot. I sure hope so. He told me a few days back he knows several such locales to park at during the rainy spell. Regardless, no matter when Deke decides to take off, I'll provide him with another dry sleeping bag and take the soggy one upstairs. Damn it, the steady drizzle has just resumed. Subject: had to call the cops again. Date January 2nd, evening. About an hour and a half ago, he started screaming at me from beneath that soggy sleeping bag. The dogs are going to die out here. I'm sick. I need to go to the hospital. You got to watch the dogs. Fuck you, Zeke. You're no friend. I stepped out twice, about 20 minutes apart, and calmly told him he's not sick. He's just a drama queen and being a nuisance. He said he'd like a drink. So I went back upstairs and got him his ginger ale, along with 2 trash bags to put over the dogs to keep them warm. Lucky wasn't even on his lap, but resting upon the shopping cart's bottom rack, protected from the rain. I placed an unfolded large trash bag over him and handed the other to Deke. Said, "Put this over Flacco, it'll help keep her warm." He accepted it, and to my surprise, also took the sweater he discarded earlier, too, that by now was dry, that he began ranting at me again. Then he began ranting at me again, so I went upstairs. Thanks to the traffic din through the rain, his bellows were muted. However, he kept it up. So I stepped outside once more, whereby he asked me to accompany him to the hospital. I could watch the dogs while he went inside. I told him, "No, you're not sick, and I'm not going to let you drag me through this stupid drama. You're not going to help me? I thought you were a friend. You're just going to let the dogs die?" I told him that's bullshit. In this case, he needs to help himself. You could have kept the cart dry by covering it, then you'd have a cozy nest for the dogs instead of exposing them to the rain. You know very well how to survive on the streets, as well as take better care of the hounds. You're not sick. You're just a jackass trickster. "I'm really sick. Been sick for days now. I just can't go to the hospital because I can't bring the dogs. Who knows better when I'm sick but me? How dare you tell me I'm not?" Well, then you leave me no option but to call 911. They'll take the dogs and keep them sheltered while you're being treated. Does that work for you? No, don't do that. I'll lose the dogs. Okay, that does it then. I replied, I'm calling the cops, and they can handle this. If you leave before they show up, I'll cancel my complaint. Bring my speaker and smartphone now. I'd rather keep your speaker out of the rain, Deke, I appealed. You can pick it up once the storm is over. No, I want it now, and you'll never see me or the dogs again. So I returned Hovel, called SFPD non-emergency, and they picked up the phone immediately. I told them the situation, just like last time. Then I double-bagged the speaker and lugged it downstairs along with the phone. By then, Flacco and Lucky were standing around, but the sister stood against the ATM plywood, afraid to approach her master because of his yelling. She wanted to go home with me. He then picked up her leash and tugged her forward with no regard for that darling creature. I ran back upstairs to fetch another dry sleeping bag, brought it down, and handed it to him. Amid his braying, he said, "Thank you for everything I have done." "You're welcome," I replied. "But you're disturbing the peace, and I won't tolerate that. No excuse for such awful behavior, Deke." As he started to take off in the direction of downtown, a police car pulled up, and a female cop stepped out and walked right by me to speak directly to Deke there by the corner, waiting to cross. I approached within 20 feet and listened. She asked if he was banging on the gate. He said no, he didn't. So I spoke out. "That was 3 days ago. He's just being a nuisance today, screaming at the top of his lungs nonstop." "Okay," she addressed me. "I don't want you two to get into an argument. I just want to know if you're satisfied that he move elsewhere." "Yes, that's fine," I replied. "I'm not interested in pressing charges. I just need him to go." I then walked back toward Deke's spot where he camped all last night and today and started cleaning up the pile of old clothing he left behind. I picked up one black trash bag to discover 3 unopened cans of dog food inside, so approached the officer once more and said, "You left this dog food, Deke. Please take it." And he did, promptly, and I returned to finish the cleanup while the cop finished speaking with him. One thing I overheard was she asked, "Do you need to go to the hospital?" He shook his head. "No, I don't." "What did I tell you, Watson?" Deke then took off, and the peacekeeper came up to me, and I said, "Thank you." I explained, "He's a friend of many years. I care very much about him and his dogs, but he takes meth and is kind of bipolar, and he's also a drama queen. He's not sick at all, just being a public nuisance and a pest, and that having a cop show up may do the trick in getting him to quell this nonsense, because last time I called, no police arrived by the time he left, and he might have concluded I faked a call in." She made the most amazing reply. "Sometimes that's all it takes." She grinned with a flash of pearly whites. "We're here for that, too, and if he acts up again, feel free to call us." I told her thank you immensely and wished her a Happy New Year, which she did in return, and she then zipped away in her vehicle. I finished cleaning up his mess, including the soggy sleeping bag he left behind, which I took upstairs to hang overnight above many copies of the Bay Area Reporter spread across the center of my dirty old floor. Like my room is actually a large parrot cage. Chirp, chirp, squawk. May Glob grant me a peaceful night.